Hello, everyone. Today, we shall be discussing the events that took place in Chapter 7 of the book 1984. It's been a long time coming. Quite the handful of months have passed, and I've yet to create or record the sequential part. However, the day has finally come, and that day is this one. So, this chapter was pretty long, and I failed to realize previously that there's at least two parts to the book. I'm assuming maybe three because it looks like I'm around the third through, and I was just like flipping through the pages, going a little bit ahead. And after chapter 7, there's chapter 8, but then it says part 2, chapter 1 afterwards. So I might have to think of a new naming scheme for these little parts that I'm recording. Anyways, as for what happened. Oh, okay. This chapter starts off, and I have some notes that I took when I was reading. I read the chapter a couple days ago, but just finally got the time to record. Yeah, this chapter starts off with Winston writing about the only hope that he believes Oceania has in overthrowing Big Brother, and that is what's it called? The proles, which will be defined later on in the chapter. Is going to be defined later on, and I am assuming the proles is just like slang term for the proletariat or the working class. And he says that this is because defection from within the party is very unlikely and borderline not possible. Defection and insurrection, all that type of stuff, through infiltration or from actual members, is not likely to happen because the measures taken by the party, by Big Brother, is they're too thorough to be like penetrated, broken through. So what's it called? He states that like even giving the wrong look or having the wrong tone while speaking could make you a suspect of treason, I guess. So any type of insurrection, any type of betrayal from within or overthrowing from within is just not feasible. Then Winston also notes how there is no like anti Big Brother citizens since what's it called? They assure that there are no enemies. Big Brother assures that there's no enemies living within the governance that Oceania has, and there'd be no way for such a group to communicate with one another or to like gather together because every place is going to be monitored. Well, most places are monitored. We're going to get into that soon, but yeah, most places are being monitored, so it's basically impossible to mount a coup d'etat or anything like that. It reminds me of well, spoiler for the previous arc in One Piece. It reminds me of how in the Wano Country arc, um, there was a group of people who wanted the previous leader back, or they sided with the previous leader in the whole revolution that happened that turned the country from a closed off nation or a regular nation to a closed off one. And the people who were supporting the previous government or the previous ruler had to like get there was this note that was passed around that only they were privy to, so no one else knew what the symbol meant, and it was supposed to be like the day that they're gonna mount their insurrection against the government, the new government that was put into place by one of the emperors of the sea, right? So I was thinking of that because there's no place for the people to gather, but I guess there might be some like O'Brien who maybe not, may not be like a non-supporter of Big Brother, but No way for us to know yet. And yeah, Winston writes a powerful line. Well, I thought it was a powerful line, summarizing the reason why it's unlikely for any insurrection to occur. It was until they become conscious, they will never rebel, and until after they rebelled, they cannot become conscious. So it's like a paradox. It's like a circle of, well, if this were to happen first, then this would happen, but this needs to happen for that to happen first. So therefore, it can never happen. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, and the book goes into detail after that line, which I thought was um, a really good line. The book goes into detail about who the proles are, and they're described as working class, or just like the group of people who take care of most of the blue collar work in this world, but they are under like terrible working conditions, such as like child labor, women working in the mines, and they have a life expectancy of around 60 years. So I'm assuming that the regular life expectancy of people in the 1984 world is more than 60 years. And this group was said to have been oppressed by the capitalists prior to the revolution. However, that might not be true, as the book suggests. And the party has claimed to free them from their servitude to the capitalists. And that's, well, a lie, because they're still working under the same conditions, probably even worse. And while the party claims that, they maintain the what's it called? While the party's making that claim, the proles, I mean, oh, sorry. The party maintains that position while also holding the position that the proles are lesser humans who ought to be treated and controlled like animals. So rather than like having like the same rights as the rest of the people in this world, they have like the rights of a farm animal or something. So the proles are essentially a different societal class that is not bound by any of the rules of Ingsoc, and they have their own communities where they live with little or no surveillance. But there's a good reasoning for that, being that they're purposely left out so that they're purposely left out and left to their own desire so that they can have no political inclinations, and any type of like spur of the moment strong emotion about anything political that does happen within that community is never going to gain enough traction to make any impact, and they're just going to end up continuing the same work that they would have been doing either way. So this makes it so that they're no threat to Ingsoc. They're it's just like, I don't know. They'll just continue to reproduce and work to the benefit of the party. Yeah. Moving forward in the chapter, Winston goes to copy down some text from a children's book about the pre-revolution life. So before like 1970s, I think it was in the book, when around that time when the revolution was happening or occurring. That's when the book is like the children's book's describing. This book describes how terrible and dreary everything was, and how before Big Brother came to power, everything was just like controlled by the capitalists, who are described as fat, ugly men with wicked faces who had the power to remove anyone's job if they ever disagreed with them, since they had the ownership of everything in society. And to me, that just sounds like what Big Brother does right now, and they're kind of gaslighting everyone into believing, well, gaslighting the kids who are reading this history book into believing that that's what the capitalists were like, and knowing how people act in this world, the kids are going to be like, oh wow, the capitalists were so bad, while completely ignoring the fact that Ingsoc's doing it to them too. Big Brother's treating them the same way they claim the capitalists treated what's it called? The capitalists treated the the regular people or the proles. Yeah, and I mean, just relating this to real life. Well, at least, um, well, what I know capitalism to be, they're not the type to remove your job because you disagree, but that's more of a tyrannical thing. Whereas capitalism is more about money, I guess, or making money and monopolizing things, or the American dream, that type of thing. It doesn't seem like that even fits. So that's just more to show how much um the history books in this world lie too. And yeah, usually another thing is that usually when a revolution happens, one tyrant is just replaced with another tyrant because who's gonna lead? Probably the leaders of the revolution. So the leaders of the revolution become the leaders of the society once they overthrow whoever it was who was in power, and because of that, well, it's they're the ones just making the rules from then on, and it kind of just rinse, repeat, that type of thing. Yeah. And Winston states that it is impossible to know how much of the book is just lies, but he said he had a negative feeling while reading that makes him know that what was being said in the book is not true, especially since everything that the party says, excuse me, everything the party says that it's doing is plain false. And the people's, like, what they said that they're doing right now is false as opposed to what the previous rulers were doing. That's what he says is false. And that people's lives look nothing like the ideals and positive changes promoted by Big Brother. For example, in a previous chapter, there was something about like the quota for chocolate and how it just changed. And most people are just, they act as if nothing changed when meanwhile everything changed. So he said because of that, those type of things, it's kind of impossible to know how much of the book is true and how much of it is false. And well, I can assume based on my knowledge of what capitalism is and based on my knowledge of how Ingsoc works so far that what they said about the capitalists is probably a lie. But it makes me wonder how they actually did get to power. Like, who was actually joining them? What tactics did they use to get into a position of power? Because I assume that that the people would not want Big Brother ruling them if this is how Big Brother was promoting themselves. Or I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, some information given about the history of the revolution is that it started in the middle of the 60s. Yeah, so the 60s, where purges or eliminations of the revolution leaders was carried out. And the only leader of the revolution remaining by the year 1970 was Big Brother. Excuse me. So, that goes to show there must have been some sketchy things going on around the revolution because everyone was eliminated except Big Brother. Does that mean that Big Brother was the leader from the start? Or does it mean that they were taken out by the opposition, so the ruling class at the time of the revolution? I don't know. It doesn't really go into much detail about that, but by 1970, Big Brother was the only leader left, and that, I guess, means that Big Brother is an individual person who we don't know the name of yet. I don't know if we ever will, but yeah, everyone else was deemed treacherous or counter-revolutionaries and had been disposed of. So that means that it was like an inside job, or Big Brother was the ruler. Because who else would deem them treacherous unless it was the leader of the revolution? So Big Brother, I guess, disposed of the rest of the leaders to maintain his power, knowing that he would come out on top after the revolution had finished, or at least that's my best guess. That's how I'm putting together these pieces of the puzzle. And what's it called? The elusive Goldstein character went into hiding at that time, and no one knows exactly where. I don't even know if this person actually exists or what their significance is going to be later on into the story. And a peculiar case described is that 3 survivors of this era, named Jones, Aronson, and Rutherford, who had gone through a year-long disappearance before returning. Okay, so those 3 people went through a year-long disappearance, then returned, and self-incriminated themselves, and then were reinstated into the party, and were pardoned because of their self-incrimination, or like confession to the crimes that they had committed, treason, I guess. And Winston remembers seeing them at the same Chestnut Tree Cafe that he frequents after they were released initially. And Winston remembers seeing the 3, and one of the 3 was tearing up at some poem that was being spouted by one of the telescreens at the cafe. And then he later found out that the 3 had been rearrested and executed upon charges of conspiracy. And in the same time period that took place in the past, so that whole memory of Winston's was from the past. In that same time period, Winston sees a piece of a article from 10 years prior to that moment, that had shown that it was clearly impossible for them to be at fault for whatever crimes they were accused of, because they had a clear alibi that they weren't even in the country or in the province or whatever it is, and that their confessions were all lies, and that they had not committed any of those crimes that they were accused of. Winston said he wants to somehow publish this and prove to the world that Ingsoc is a bunch of liars, but ends up placing, what's it called, the photograph that was the proof, from the article, alongside other trivial documents into the memory hole, so that he would not be caught. And the memory holes is that thing that's kind of like a paper shredder, but for any type of document that's unneeded or that would prove something about Ingsoc. So that's what that is. And yeah, the book states that if the same thing were to happen at the current time that it's narrating, like, so the present of the book, so 1984, the year that's thought to be 1984, Winston would have held on to the photo. And yeah, not that it would have been of any use though, because the past is always being rewritten by Ingsoc, so it wouldn't have mattered anymore, because no one would even know what actually did happen. And there's probably some way that Ingsoc could get around that. And then he just wants to prove it, even if he seems like a lunatic. That's what he says. But he's a proud lunatic, essentially, saying that he'd rather be a lunatic but know the truth than a normal person, a normie, but living a lie, following a lie, believing the lie. And then this chapter ends off with another really good statement saying, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4. If that is granted, all else follows. And that's where the chapter ends off. So there's a lot that happened. Like, I tried to summarize it as condensedly as possible. As condensed as possible. But I don't know if I was truly able to do that. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. We're getting to know a little bit more of the history behind it. I hope that the next chapter really goes into what the revolution was, why it occurred, who the other leaders were, what they stood for, aside from Big Brother, because we know we know somewhat about Big Brother, but we don't know his motives either, or his purpose or cause, like why control this society. It seems kind of mundane, but again, we don't know what's the point of having all that power in this world. I don't understand. But yeah, with that, this chapter is now complete, and I will be attempting at least to get the last chapter of part 1 out in a jiffy. We'll see what happens. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked it, please press the like button and, subscribe if you want to as well. With that, I'm out.